Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Those were the words of Jesus Christ, taken from the 7th verse of the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew in the New Testament in the King James Bible. But they could just as easily have been uttered by me with regards to how I run this channel. Ever since I started this channel over 4 years ago, I've tried to take on any video ideas that have been requested multiple times by several different subscribers or have received a large number of likes. It is for this reason that HITC Sevens has been nicknamed by you, the people, as the People's Channel. And as you can see, it hasn't given me any delusions of grandeur or gone to my head at all. For the record, I am not suggesting that I'm Jesus. That would be for others to decide. But I am saying that a number of people have asked me to take a look at the original founding members of the European Cup from the 1955-56 season, focusing on where those teams are now. And that is exactly what I'm going to do. Just like Jesus would, I've no doubt, if you asked him nicely enough. The European Cup, in case any of you didn't know, was the precursor to the Champions League. Officially named the Coupe des Clubs Champions Européens, or the European Champion Clubs Cup, but more commonly known as the European Cup, the tournament began in the 1955-56 season, and was initially met with mixed feelings. The European Cup wasn't the first tournament to pit teams from different European countries against each other. The English and the Scottish champions had done so as early as 1895, followed by the Challenge Cup in Austria-Hungary in 1897, and most notably, there was the more expansive Mitropa Cup, founded in 1927. The European Cup was the first to be organised by UEFA though, and it promised to be the first to truly span all parts of the continent. That wouldn't quite be the case in 1955-56, as the Football Association banned Chelsea from competing, so that they could concentrate on their domestic campaign, and Scottish champions Aberdeen turned down their invitation for the same reason. Those two weren't alone. Holland Sport, Budapest Honvéd, and AB also turned down their invitations, but unlike in the case of Chelsea, they were replaced by other teams from the Netherlands, Hungary, and Denmark. There was no official qualification process for the first European Cup, as there is now, and has been for a long time. The teams who were asked to compete were simply selected by the French football magazine, L'Équipe, whose modus operandi was to select both the most prestigious and most representative set of clubs in all of Europe. In today's video, we're going to take a look at each of those teams, their standing at the time, what they have achieved since then, and where they are now. This list contains some teams who remain among Europe's elite, some teams who compete in their country's third or fourth tiers, and even one team that no longer exists. So there is some real variety in there. Here are the 16 teams from the very first European Cup in 1955-56. Where are they now? Sportclub Rapid Wien, Austrian Bundesliga. Few nations played a more pivotal role, if any, in the development of football within mainland Europe than Austria. And you could certainly argue that none played a bigger role in the foundation of the European Cup. The Challenge Cup, mainland Europe's first multinational knockout competition, took place in Austria-Hungary, and the Mitropa Cup was also created in light of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's demise. Founded in 1897 and renamed SK Rapid Wien in 1899, Rapid Vienna have long been, and still remain, Austria's most successful club. Though their domestic success began in the 1910s, it was during the interwar period of the 1930s that Rapid really came to international attention, as Austria's Wunder team conquered Europe, with Rapid supplying them with some of their brightest lights. During World War II, Rapid competed in the German Football League system and actually won the 1941 German Championship, which I covered in a documentary fairly recently, which I'll try to leave a link to in the video description. The Green Whites were very much Austrian once again though by 1955, and as the 1954-55 Austrian champions, they were invited to represent the country at the inaugural European Cup. They reached the quarter-finals, which remains one of the club's finest performances in UEFA's Premier Cup competition. The only time the club has bettered it was in the 1960-61 campaign, when they went all the way to the semi-finals before losing to Benfica. A club that has never been relegated, whilst Rapid Wien remain Austria's most successful club, their dominance has been severely threatened by Red Bull franchise Red Bull Salzburg, who have won the last 8 Austrian Bundesliga titles on the bounce. VÖRÖS LOBOGÓ, NB1. I just realised that given the fact that there were 16 teams competing in the first ever European Cup, I probably can't devote quite as much time to them all as I did to Rapid Vienna, which is a shame since there are some fascinating clubs in this list, and none of them more so than this one. VÖRÖS LOBOGÓ will be better known to most of you as MTK Budapest, or simply MTK, though I've little doubt that a number of viewers will still be uttering the words "who" under their breath right now. A club of many names, MTK were founded with close ties to the Hungarian aristocracy and Budapest's sizable Jewish population, but they were renamed 3 times during Hungary's communist era before becoming MTK once again. MTK play at the Hidegkuti Nándor Stadium, named after one of the club's most famous players, Nándor Hidegkuti, who is often considered to be the brains behind Hungary's legendary golden generation of the late 1940s to the mid-1950s. 23-time Hungarian champions, MTK still compete in Hungary's top flight, though they haven't been crowned as champions since 2008. These days, MTK have a partnership with Liverpool's academy, and they recently signed former Hull City midfielder James Weir. Sporting Club de Portugal, Portuguese Primeira Liga. Though Benfica actually won the 1954-55 Portuguese Primeira Liga title, it was their great rival Sporting who were invited to compete in the first ever European Cup. That is most likely because, whilst Benfica were crowned champions the previous season, Sporting were the big attraction in Portuguese football throughout the 1940s and 50s. Portugal's domestic game was not among Europe's strongest at this time, both at club and international level, and they made frankly extraordinary strides from 1955 onwards over the next decade. Nonetheless, Sporting had an all-conquering team on home soil, famous for their tremendous attacking quintet nicknamed the Five Violins, with Europe's most prolific goal scorer on a goals per game basis, Fernando Peirotio, at the heart of it. Sporting were dumped out 8-5 in the first leg of the tournament and have never got beyond the quarter-final stage of UEFA's flagship competition. They will have another crack at doing so this season, having qualified automatically for the group stage of the Champions League as Primeira Liga champions last season, during a season in which they only lost 1 league game. Djurgården Fotboll, Allsvenskan. A club with 2 managers, about 5 different names, and 12 Swedish championships, Djurgården Fotboll, Djurgårdens IF, Djurgården, or whatever else you want to call them, were Sweden's sole representatives in the first European Cup, just a year after the country hosted the World Cup. Djurgården were Allsvenskan winners in the 1954-55 season, which was their first Swedish championship in fact, hence their invitation. They have qualified for the European Cup, or the Champions League, 5 times since then, most recently last season, where they were knocked out by Hungarian outfit Ferencváros in the first qualifying round. Djurgården's most famous son was a man named Gösta Sandberg, who scored 77 goals in 322 games for the club, won more than 50 caps for Sweden, but also represented his country in ice hockey, including winning bronze at the 1952 Winter Olympics in Finland. Sandberg famously died whilst returning home from a game between Djurgården and their great cross-city Stockholm rivals AIK at the age of 73. Still a top-flight team today, Djurgården were crowned as Swedish champions in 2019 and they finished 4th in the league last season. Anderlecht, Belgian Pro League. 3-time European Cup Winners' Cup finalists and 1-time winners, Anderlecht have never won the European Cup or the Champions League, but they are still Belgium's most successful club. Anderlecht's success as a club wasn't instant, founded in 1908, and they didn't win their first major trophy until after the end of World War II. They were invited to compete in the 1955-56 European Cup as reigning champions of the Belgian game, but they were battered and bruised 10-4 by MTK over 2 legs in the first round. With a magnificent record of churning out talent and of sustained success since the mid-1940s, Anderlecht were once tied at the top of UEFA's club coefficients alongside Juventus. These days, they are down in 62nd place, as the finances of European football have concentrated the continent's talent in just a handful of leagues. Now managed by Vincent Kompany, Anderlecht finished 4th in the Belgian Pro League last season, which constitutes a poor performance by their standards. And it means that they are competing in the inaugural UEFA Europa Conference League this season, which has a nice sort of symmetry about it for the purposes of this video, doesn't it? AC Milan, Serie. The first team in this video who have actually won the European Cup, or the Champions League, AC Milan are actually the second most successful team in the history of the competition, having been crowned as champions on 7 occasions, in addition to having been losing finalists on 4 occasions. AC Milan's fondness for the European Cup began early on, invited in light of having won the previous season's Scudetto, kickstarting one of the most successful eras in the history of the club, and they reached the semi-finals of that first European Cup. Losing finalists in extra time in the 1958 European Cup, the Rossoneri claimed their first European crown in 1963 when they beat Benfica 2-1 at the old Wembley Stadium. Almost permanent members of Serie, AC Milan, have been relegated to Serie B twice, and they returned to the top flight as champions at the first attempt on both occasions. Having been arguably the best team in world football during the 2000s, AC Milan suffered a fairly steep decline as the 2010s wore on, before enjoying a renaissance last season, finishing second to their cross-city rivals Inter Milan, with whom they share a home ground. FC Saarbrücken, 3rd Liga. I said there were a number of fascinating teams who competed in the very first European Cup, and that is indicated by the fact that I have made documentaries about at least 3 of them. FC Saarbrücken are one of them, so if you get a taste of Saarland during this segment and are left gagging for more, feel free to check out my short documentary all about the region, club, and their former national team. When the first European Cup took place in 1955-56, Saarland, which is now a region of Germany, was its own independent nation, with its own independent national team and its own independent football association. Consequently, Saarland's finest, FC Saarbrücken, were invited to compete in the competition, simultaneously becoming the first and last representatives from Saarland to feature at the tournament, as the region voted to be reunified with West Germany during the same year. Saarbrücken were a fabulous team, and they were only beaten 7-5 across 2 legs by the might of AC Milan in the first round of the European Cup. These days, Saarbrücken have a little less star power, competing in the 3rd Liga, which, as its name suggests, is the 3rd tier of German football. SERVETTE FC, Swiss Super League. I said earlier on that Austria could stake a claim to have played the most pivotal role of any nation in the establishment of a fully European-wide club competition, and if any nation could beat them to that title, it would be Switzerland, and specifically Swiss outfit Servette. Founded in 1890, Servette were the first club to formally try and create a European Cup, some 25 years before UEFA took the idea on board and ran with it. Servette hosted the Coupe des Nations in 1930, inviting 10 teams from 10 different European countries to compete in a summer competition in Geneva. The hosts, Servette, were battered 7-0 by First Vienna in the first round, but the tournament was a big success, attracting lots of interest, but it never took place again. Once managed by the great Bela Gutmann, who actually managed 3 teams who feature in this video, Servette are the 3rd most successful Swiss club and the most successful from the francophone part of the nation. Nicknamed the Maroons, Servette haven't won the Swiss Super League since 1998, shortly before falling into financial trouble, which culminated in the club going bankrupt and being relegated to the 3rd tier in 2004-05. They returned to the Swiss Super League in 2019 and finished 3rd out of 10 teams in the season just gone. AARHUS Gymnastikforening, Danish Superliga. AARHUS Gymnastikforening, better known as AGF, were invited to compete in the 1955-56 European Cup after Copenhagen-based top-flight runners-up AB turned down the offer. It arguably made more sense for AGF to represent Denmark at the tournament since they won the previous season's Danish First League 2 points ahead of AB. Founded in 1880 as a sports club focused primarily on gymnastics and fencing at that time, football was added to AGF's curriculum in 1902. Though they are among the least successful teams featured in this video, AGF are still 5-time champions of Danish football and 9-time Danish Cup winners, the latter of which is actually a record. They were, nonetheless, beaten in the first round of the European Cup, and they have only returned to the competition on 4 occasions. Their most impressive showing came in the 1960-61 campaign, when AGF knocked out Legia Warsaw and Fredrikstad en route to a quarter-final defeat, which they lost 7-2 against Benfica. AGF are still a top-flight team, albeit they haven't won the league title since 1986, and they finished 4th in the Danish Superliga last season. PSV Eindhoven, Eredivisie. Replacements for Holland Sport, who are a team that you could be forgiven for never having heard of, whilst other teams in this video now playing the 3rd tier, PSV Eindhoven, were actually a 3rd tier team in 1955, competing in the Eerste C, which they won that season as champions. PSV weren't even the highest ranked team in Eindhoven at that time, with FC Eindhoven competing in the Hoofdklasse A, which was the Netherlands' top flight and which is now known as the Eredivisie. Holland Sport, whose place PSV took, and who are now known as SSV Scheveningen, were top-flight runners-up in 1955, but now compete in the 3rd tier of Dutch football. PSV, meanwhile, have had the exact opposite trajectory, and are now one of the Netherlands' big 3 in the Eredivisie, having won 24 top-flight league titles, 9 KNVB Cups, and they even joined AC Milan as the 2nd team in this list to have actually won the European Cup. In the first European Cup, PSV were dumped out 6-2 in aggregate by Rapid Wien in the first round, but their crowning moment came in 1988, when the club won an incredible continental treble, beating Benfica 6-5 on penalties in the final. Hibernian, Scottish Premiership. The 4th and final team who appeared at the 1955-56 European Cup as a replacement for a team from their country who turned down their initial invitation. As I said during the introduction, Aberdeen were the champions of Scottish football in the 1954-55 season, but they turned down their invitation. Celtic, Rangers, and their bitter rivals Hearts all finished above Hibs that season, but it was the team named after the Roman word for Ireland who took Aberdeen's place. Hibs actually went all the way to the semi-finals of the first European Cup, which, it perhaps won't surprise you to discover, is the furthest they've ever gone in the competition. In fact, Hibs have never actually qualified for the European Cup or the Champions League since reaching the semis in 56, though they have made plenty of appearances in other UEFA competitions. Founded way back in 1875, Hibs have won a grand total of 4 Scottish top-flight league titles, most recently in 1952. They have tasted more recent success in both the Scottish Cup and the Scottish League Cup, and their club finished 3rd in the Scottish Premiership last season, earning qualification to the new UEFA Europa Conference League. ROT-WEISS Essen, Regionalliga West. ROT-WEISS Essen won their first and only German championship in 1955, winning the Oberliga West before defeating FC Kaiserslautern 4-3 in the final of the German Championship. That was enough to earn them an invitation to the 1955-56 European Cup, but things didn't go too great for the club from Essen. They lost 5-1 on aggregate, over 2 legs, to the Scottish 5th place side the previous season, Hibernian. Much like Hibs, ROT-WEISS Essen, who are commonly referred to as RWE, have never since appeared in the competition. In the late 1970s, RWE fell into serious financial trouble, suffering a set of relegations, and they have never returned to the Bundesliga since. These days, the club competes in the Regionalliga West, which is one of the 5 regional leagues that make up the semi-professional 4th tier of German football. Stade de Reims, Liga. It was the French magazine L'Équipe that selected the invitees to the first European Cup, and it was France who would host the very first European Cup final. From their own shores, L'Équipe asked Stade de Reims to represent La France. That wasn't a particularly controversial decision, given the fact that Reims had won the 1954-55 Ligue 1 title with a 4-point gap over Toulouse, and they were real powerhouses within the French game from the late 1940s through to the early 1960s. Founded in 1931, Reims cultivated a reputation not just as one of the most successful clubs in France, but also one of the proudest footballing institutions, giving birth to the likes of Roger Marsh, Raymond Kopa, and Just Fontaine, who all became legends for the national team. Rom's 1955-56 European Cup journey was one that would be thrilling for their own fans, but also for neutrals, given the number of goals on show. Roms beat AGF 4-2 over 2 legs in the first round, MTK 8-6 in the quarterfinals, and Hibs 3-0 in the semis, before falling to a 4-3 defeat in the final to a team that is still to feature. They reached a second final just 3 years later, inspired by the goals of Just Fontaine, but lost another final to the same opposition. Roms haven't won a major trophy since 1962, and the club suffered a steep fall from grace during the 1980s. For more than 30 years, Roms yo-yoed between the third and second tiers of French football, but they're back in Liga now, managed by former Watford and Brighton boss Oscar Garcia, and they finished 14th in France's top flight last season. WARDZIA Warszawa. Extinct. Well, I promised you a team that no longer exists in the introduction, and now we come to them. WARDZIA Warszawa, fallen giants of the Polish game. Poland weren't initially supposed to be represented at the first European Cup, but after the Football Association advised Chelsea to focus on their domestic campaign and no other English clubs were forthcoming, L'Équipe turned to Poland instead. WARDZIA were not Polish champions in either 1954 or 1955, finishing 4th in both of those seasons, but they did win the Polish Cup, which was the only major trophy that they ever won, in 1954, hence their invite. During the communist era of the Polish People's Republic, WARDZIA, as the name suggests, were the club of the Polish police, and they received plenty of funding, becoming a really competitive team. They drew with Djurgården in their European Cup opener before losing 4-1 in the second leg. However, when communism fell in Poland in 1989, so too did WARDZIA. They lost funding and support and dropped down the divisions. What's more, the police, who still owned their stadium, ended up being a real thorn in their side, locking them out of the ground and forcing the club to bounce around various stadiums and fields to fulfill their home fixtures. It all became too much for the club in 2018, who, by this stage, were competing in Poland's amateur 7th tier and had no money left, and the one-time Polish Cup champions were dissolved. Real Madrid. La Liga. To tell the tale of the first 5 years of the European Cup is to tell a tale of absolute dominance on the part of Real Madrid. Inspired by the arrival of Alfredo Di Stefano in 1953, club president Santiago Bernabeu had taken Los Blancos from being the second best team in Madrid to the finest team in all of Europe, and UEFA's new flagship competition gave them a chance to illustrate that fact. Whilst there is a perception that Real Madrid simply blew everyone away in those first 5 years of the European Cup, that isn't actually true on a game-by-game basis. In 1955-56, for example, after battering Swiss outfit Servette 7-0 over 2 legs in the first round, Los Blancos never won another tie by more than a 1-goal margin. Partizan and AC Milan both beat them over single legs, but lost on aggregate 4-3 and 5-4 respectively, before the club from Madrid overcame Rennes in Paris in a similarly closely fought match, ultimately running out as 4-3 winners. After their remarkable head start, Real Madrid have continued to remain a near constant presence in the European Cup and Champions League, recently winning 4 trophies in the space of only 5 seasons. Their 2 eras of sustained dominance, alongside 4 titles more evenly spaced out, mean that Madrid have won a total of 13 Champions League titles, almost double that of any other club. Real Madrid are, of course, also still one of the dominant powers within the Spanish game, with 34 La Liga titles to their name, though it looks as though both they and their El Clasico rivals Barcelona may have to tighten their bootstraps over the next few years, following years of financial mismanagement. FK Partizan. Serbian Superliga. The final inclusions in what has turned out to be a fairly lengthy video, my apologies for that, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. FK Partizan are sometimes referred to as Partizan Belgrade here in the UK, and like WARDZIA Warszawa, they were a club of a major state institution during their country's communist era. Partizan were the team of the armed forces during the days of the Socialist Republic of Serbia, where they formed an eternal rivalry with their Belgrade-based rivals Red Star. Unlike Red Star, Partizan have never won the European Cup or the Champions League, though they did beat Sporting Club de Portugal in their first ever European fixture, before narrowly losing 4-3 to eventual winners Real Madrid in the quarter-finals. 11-time Yugoslav First League champions, 8-time Serbia and Montenegro First League champions, and 8-time Serbian Superliga champions, Partizan have won a grand total of 27 league titles, and they are Serbia's most successful club since the breakup of Yugoslavia. Captained by former Liverpool signing and Hull City loanee Lazar Markovic these days, Partizan finished second in the Serbian Superliga last season as rivals Red Star romped to the title without losing a single league game all season. So that is it for today's video, but thank you all ever so much, as ever, for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or Instagram via the username at HITC Sevens on both, if that is something that sounds like it might appeal to you.